So the foundation was set up 2010, and we work across these different areas. We work across business. So we have a network of businesses around the world, some key global players that can help change the system from within. And we also work across learning. That includes schools and colleges level, but also at higher education level, and also informal and online learning. And we have systemic initiatives, which are essentially deep dives into specific sectors within the economy. So we have a team working on the plastics industry. We have a team looking at the global fashion industry. We have a team looking at the food industry and the finance industry, and I'm sure there'll be many others. But these are kind of really trying to dive into those key areas and try and transition them from linear to circular. We also work with institutions, governments and cities worldwide. And then we have a team called Insight and Analysis, which help provide all the robust evidence that the kind of rationale for the circular economy sits on, and helps to showcase that this is a viable model, that it can be profitable for businesses, and it can have win-wins for society and the environment. So we try as much as possible to base everything around circular economy thinking on evidence and clearly communicating that to people. So let's all start then by just getting to grips with actually what a circular economy is. Now, I know there are so many different definitions that exist. That some are very long and more detailed. In my work, which often involves going to schools and talking to students, I like to use this just because it's very, very simple, but it kind of speaks to the main points. So the circular economy is an approach to designing, making, and using things in a way that benefits the economy, society, and environment. And what's really quite crucial about that is the last bit about benefiting the economy, society, and environment. That is really at the crux of the circular economy, is trying to get the win-win-win across those three levels. And the starting point for circular economy thinking is to actually think about these as interdependent systems. They don't exist separate from each other in isolation. The vitality of one affects the vitality of them all, which, if I just flick back to our logo, that's actually what this represents. The three rings of our logo, you have the inner ring, which represents the economy, which is embedded within society, and then the external ring, which is also embedded within the environment. So these three systems sit together, and for a long time, we haven't been able to operate within the kind of the equilibrium. We haven't been able to keep those things in the right balance. So that's what we're striving for. So what I would like to do then is show you a short video clip of an economist called Kate Raworth. And it's an interesting clip because she says a lot in a short amount of time, but really there are some really core fundamentals of circular economy thinking in this video. And so what I'd like to do is show it to you and then unpack it a little bit.
The structural difficulty in today's economic system with respect to cycling resources.
Just here we go.
More effectively. So there's a real drive to create circular economies. Let me just never travel without a bit of host pipe, right? So the linear 20th century economy would take those materials, make them into stuff we want, use it for a while, and throw it away. And that linear system needs to be turned into a closed loop. There's a real danger that individual companies will say, well, send the materials back to us and we will create a circular loop. But you could end up with hundreds, thousands of these individual loops. That will never work because nature would laugh at us. Nature doesn't work in segmented circularity. Nature creates an ecosystem of resource use. So that resources, be they plastics or metals or textiles, are brought back into the ecosystem, broken down to their fundamental materials and reused again. Think of nature. She turns things back into cellulose, lignin, chitin, keratin, and builds anew. We have to create ecosystems of resource use, and they are inherently distributed by design. A decentralized...
Okay, so let's just, yeah. So in that video, Kate touches on a number of really key things. And the first thing she touches on is this idea of where we are right now, which is the linear economy, which is described as take, make, waste. And that's because we take resources out of the ground, we make them into products, and then ultimately they end up as waste. And use the clever analogy of the pipe work. And it is, I like to think of it almost like a conveyor belt, it's like a machine, resources going in and waste coming out. So that's the first thing that she touches on. The second thing is this idea that the circular economy is a concept inspired by nature. And this, personally, this really appeals to me. And this gives rise to a new way of looking at the economy. So instead of looking at it like a machine, we actually have a new metaphor and a new way of looking at it, and it's more like a forest. And it uses this description. She talks about ecosystems of resource use, which I think is brilliant, and that's really what we're trying to get to. And she says that to simply close material loops, if all the individual companies just did that, then that would only benefit those companies. And it's almost like having a tree in a forest that puts a boundary around itself and claims all the nutrients that fall from its leaves for itself. And she says, nature would laugh at us. It doesn't work like that. Nature is generous. Nutrients feed all kinds of other new life. So the goal of the circular economy then is to create these ecosystems of use. And I like to think of this as one of the first things I learned about the circular economy was this idea of waste equals food, as in, can we reinterpret and reframe our idea of waste so that everything goes back into productive use like it does in nature. Nature does not create waste. Waste always feeds and regenerates new life. And so we're in a time and a place where actually we have such levels of communication and connection. Digital technology really unlocks potential to create what Kate describes as an ecosystem of resource use. Because we have so many more touch points and connection points now, more than ever, and the transparency and the kind of infrastructure to make it happen. But there's still a long way to go. So that was just a few things which stuck out for me when I saw that video clip, which I thought were worth sharing. And so this is what we're trying to get towards. We're trying to get towards a system that is based on 3 core principles, where we design out waste and pollution, we keep products and materials in use for as long as possible, and we regenerate natural systems. And I'd like to just pick out a couple of examples here that will help to showcase each of these core principles. So the first one is to design out waste and pollution. This means that instead of thinking of clever ways to clear up waste once it's already been created, it's actually about saying, how do we stop waste being created in the first place? And if there is waste, how does that get put into back to use? How can it feed new things, new life? So a good example here, designing out waste and pollution. This is a company called EcoNative based in the US. And what they do is they take an agricultural waste product that used to be just a nuisance to farmers they take it off their hands for them, and they take this and they seed it with a fungus called mycelium, which comes from mushrooms. And under certain temperatures, this mycelium grows and it forms a network that binds together, and it can be grown into any shape, any mold desired, as you can see from this headline. And it can be used, they're using it as a completely non-toxic alternative to styrofoam packaging. And I believe HP and some other companies are using this to ship their electronics. It has also been used as insulation in buildings. So it has a variety of uses, but one of the most exciting is the fact that this can be a form of packaging which is actually biodegradable, completely non-toxic. The second principle is to keep products and materials in use, which sounds really simple, and it is very simple in many ways, and it's kind of going back almost to what older generations, my grandparents' generations, would have been used to doing, but obviously it's not something that's common these days. And a good example of keeping stuff in use, a company like Patagonia, which is a clothing brand, they've built a brand around this idea of having stuff that lasts long. Repair is a radical act. So they, as a company, they publish repair guides. They run community repair workshops, repair cafes. They also partnered with an online resale platform called Wornwear, so that they can actually sell secondhand Patagonia clothing, which is a win for them because it means that they can open up their brand to a wider pool of consumers, people that might not be able to afford brand new gear but can still access it secondhand. And so that's keeping those materials and giving new life to that clothing. And the last principle that we talk about is to regenerate natural systems. And this essentially means giving back more than we take. So this is where the circular economy is really kind of quite different from a lot of the sustainability narratives that have been around for quite a long time, which have often revolved around this idea of doing less and how do we minimize our impact on the planet? How do we just do less and minimize things? And so this idea of actually being regenerative is actually to say, how do we have an overall positive impact rather than just doing less? How do we actually do more? How do we regenerate, restore the soil health, restore the biosphere? So those are key things that we're considering here. And to highlight this last principle, I'd like to show you this video of a sugarcane farmer from Brazil. He's called Leontino Balbo, and he's pioneered some quite interesting approaches to how he ran his farm, how he runs his farm. So he inherited the family business, and they were using huge amounts of chemical fertilizer and pesticides. These were running off the land. It was degrading the health of the soils. It was contaminating ecosystems. And he was having to use vast quantities of water to irrigate the land, and it wasn't being retained. The soil just wasn't holding on to the water. So he started doing things a little bit differently. Let's just go back. Let's click on this.
I made myself open to the nature wisdom. I started seeing inside the forest like an infographic. Everything happening. The birds, the insects, and that everything was interconnected. And there was a very sophisticated system of communication. And I realized that all those insects were not attacking any plant inside the forest. But the same insects used to attack the canes. So why? So I started observing what used to happen inside that forest. And one by one, example by example, I learned, I started transferring to the cultural area. There are lots of useful information in the nature that we can use to create the basis of a new production system, which is less impactant, which is more rational and more efficient. We can observe that these are totally healthy leaves, and the reason is the focus here. We do not put focus too much on the crop. The focus is in the environment as a whole, in the ecosystem as a whole. The result of that is the ecosystem itself takes care about the crop. We don't fertilize the crop. We feed the soil life, and then they take care about the cane, about its nutrition, its immunologic system, and we don't have one eaten part, one bite, nothing, no disease in our cane. 20,000 hectares.
Okay, so I really like that example because it really shows how much we have to learn from nature. And as Leontino did, by applying what he observed and saw happening in the natural ecosystem in the forest beside his farm, he was able to one by one transfer and apply those those ecosystem dynamics to his operations, to what he was doing on the farm, and was having incredible results. So it took quite a long time for the benefits of this to pay off. It was a long-term game and quite a gamble for him, but at the end, in the end of the day, this was working for him at scale, which is what I like about this regenerative example, is that it's not niche. It's 20,000 hectares. He's a huge sugarcane producer, but this is working for him, this method. So let's move on. Another thing that I would like to emphasize at this point is that the circular economy is much more than just an environmental initiative, as some people might think it is. We've always talked about it as an economic opportunity, and this has really helped us get the buy-in and the interest from businesses, because we need those businesses to start changing the way that they operate. And if there isn't a clear case for them to do so, then why would they? It becomes very difficult. So in 2012, one of our first reports aimed to quantify this opportunity. And what you're looking at here shows that for the fast-moving consumer goods sector, the total annual material input value, that's all of the value of all the material that goes into that sector, was estimated about $3.2 trillion. And of that, around 80%, or 2.7 trillion, was lost as waste. So this really, it gives a huge incentives for businesses to start thinking about how do we capture some of that lost value, because it's money literally being poured away. So there is a strong economic case for a circular economy and the benefits that it can bring. So what does this all mean in terms of education? So if we understand that it's important to go from this very extractive linear model to one that is circular, to one that is regenerative, then it obviously is going to have serious implications for the way that we teach our students. And one of the things that is quite interesting is this idea of, well, we've become very adept at understanding the infinitely great, and we've become very adept at understanding the infinitely small. And we've developed the telescope and the microscope for those purposes. But what some thinkers and systems thinkers are calling out for is this idea of a macroscope. How do we understand the infinitely complex? Because that is where we need to grapple with. It's really the challenge, is to understand how everything, all of this fits together, which comes back to the point I was making right at the beginning around the economy and environment being these very interdependent systems. So what's good for one is good for them all. And on a slightly more tangible level, what does this mean in terms of how education might need to evolve? Lots of this will be very familiar to you. I won't read through all of them, but I'll just stop talking for a moment so you can have a look. Excuse me. You can have a look at the kind of shift, where we're coming from and where we're heading towards. So some of the skills that are required in this transition are very different. And just to pick out some of them, instead of reductionism, it's looking at systems, a whole system emphasis. And instead of individual learning, it's team or group learning. And instead of just purely being competitive, it's competitive and collaborative. And that is absolutely essential in the business world as well. You know, we need to kind of be able to break out of these silos and actually help lift the overall prosperity and help work together, because there will be some industries' wastes will be food for other industries, and that, you know, that's a key principle of industrial ecology. So let's move on. Finally, then, the circular economy is really, think of it as a new story, and it is a new story that points ways of creating prosperity within the means of the planet. And it's very compelling for people, especially for young people, because it's a very positive story. It's a story about innovation and creativity and about doing more, rather than always thinking about doing less. And how do we always minimize the damage, but how do we actually start innovating? We have a positive impact. So some of the takeaways then for students, anybody learning about the circular economy, is that firstly, it is a positive vision of the future, and it is about giving back more than we take. It's about innovation, creativity. It's about doing more, and it's asking students to challenge the status quo, to say there are better ways of doing things. Just because things have been happening this way for a long time doesn't mean that it has to continue. Everyone has a role to play. That's essential. If we think from designers, entrepreneurs, business leaders, teachers, engineers, artists, there's almost nobody that doesn't have some kind of role to play in developing this new system. And another key takeaway would be to kind of break out of the reductionist mindset and to start thinking in systems. This is absolutely crucial. Being able to see the bigger picture. As we could see from Leontino's example on the sugar farm, he started to break out of this kind of linear approach, this kind of reductionist approach to operating his business, and started to think like a systems thinker. And to just highlight the kind of the role of systems thinking as well, if we take the example of a designer, they could just design a product that simply meets a person's need and looks nice. And for a long time, that was kind of what designers were about. But a designer who's thinking from, you know, using systems thinking would actually say, well, okay, they would actually say, well, we want a product that looks good, that meets needs, but we also need to be thinking about what happens at the end of that product's life. How might it be reused? How might I use materials that are non-toxic? Or how might I make it so that it can be easily disassembled and its components recycled? How might it be transported? And you might even consider, does it need to be sold, or could it actually be provided as a service? So suddenly the scope of your thinking and what is actually coming, what you're concerned with, expands greatly. And so I'd like to finish there to say thank you very much. And if you would like to access more resources, we have an online circular economy case study library. We have an online learning hub. We have schools and colleges resources. All of these can be found at ellenmacarthurfoundation.org. And I'll now finish there and pass you over.
Thank you so much, Harrison, for this amazing presentation. And I can see that there are already some questions popping up on chat, but we will come back to them after a presentation from Pramod. So please also stay with us, and there will be time for discussion. So like announcement to everyone, if you have any questions, please also write them on chat and we will come back to them. Thank you. And now, Pramod, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gosia. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it's nice to be able to have this webinar in these difficult times and use this opportunity to reflect and think about a new approach that is important. And as Harrison pointed out, I think the important thing is that it is very simple in terms of three concepts that he talked about: design out waste, keep things in use as far as possible, and regenerate systems. And as we look at from an environmental education perspective or education for sustainable development perspective, it is an integrative subject, and we are now putting together and piloting a project with support of Lucar Professional in Latvia and Slovenia. And the project is called EcoSchool Project Advancing Circular Economy, or eSpace in short. I'm using the word advancing for two reasons. One is that as consumers, our decisions matter a lot, and our decisions motivate companies to integrate and produce with the concept of circular economy, with the three principles in mind, and also increase the consumption of products, or I would say motivate people to consume products which meet this criteria. The second thing that is important from that perspective, when we are saying advancing, as Harrison also pointed out, that most of the decisions are taken at the designer level. 80% of circularity is decided when the product is designed. So it is important that our future designers have this perspective in mind. And the concept and motivation comes from the nature, where there is no concept of waste. The project eSpace is built on positive action, which we call handprint, which is action towards sustainability. The idea is to increase action that reduces consumption or shifts the consumption to more sustainable products, take action that support resilience of our system. And Harrison highlighted that we need to be regenerative. And resilience is one concept or one part of that larger concept of regeneration. Taking actions for waste minimization and design out waste is that concept, and then support sustainable products and services, and increase awareness of action that supports sustainability. And last point is important, that inform and involve is an important step within the EcoSchool 7-step pedagogy. And it's if we want action and we want more sustainable world, we need to learn and then also disseminate that learning to all our networks and other people that we work with or we are in touch with. So the idea of eSpace is that we increase our focus from linear economy, which is produce, consume, and then dispose, to somewhat recycling that is happening towards more circular. So the more we recycle or increase and use those three core principles, we will move towards our journey towards circular economy. And project is demonstrating a way of doing the shift from a linear to recycling and circular and towards circular economy. As an educational process, a positive action is dependent on the knowledge the students have, the competencies they develop, because the knowledge is not enough. How to use that knowledge in real life is important. The attitude, disposition. And I would like to highlight the attitudes or disposition is the most important determinant of behaviors and action. And we have to develop positive attitude and positive disposition towards behavior and action that advance circular economy. So the need is to stimulate without prescribing. The three principles that we discussed in the earlier presentation and highlighted in the beginning, we have simplified those for our project implementation, and it is an integrative process. And I would like to, and this is one of the questions that also came out, that is more about collaboration and integration. And circular economy is a way of integrating all the work that we are doing for environmental education in a school. So the most important activities, which is to design out waste, is to refuse and reduce. So refuse things that you do not need and things that cannot be recycled. And the second point is reduce consumption of resources, anything like, for example, water. So reduce and refusion is the first important principle that can design out waste. Second is keeping in use is the concept we have put under the reuse concept, which is about reusing by repairing, refurbishing, and repurposing things. And think of sharing, borrowing, and renting. So instead of owning things, think of hiring a car. For example, instead of buying a car, can we hire a car whenever we need it as a taxi or any other way? Because you will realize that most of the time the car is standing with all the material that has been used to produce. 70 to 80% of car is standing without running on the road. So we will reduce the consumption of material that is required to produce the car, but also reduce the traffic and the pollution associated with it. And the third, if we are not able to reduce, and reuse, the third, which is closer to linear economy, is try to recycle and recover. And that's what we are trying to do. We segregate our waste, we put metal in metal boxes, which goes for recycling. Same we do with paper and plastic. And you also know that the last one is that when we are not able to recycle, we can still take the energy out by burning waste to produce more electricity or other things. So the project approach is that schools join the eSpace program using the 7-step pedagogy or the methodology in the EcoSchool program. They try to increase the circularity in this school that they are and practice those behaviors and ideas or strategies, and then present the outcome and feedback and award. I will like to highlight that the circular economy compliant school is a concept that can be easily taken to home in this situation when the children are stuck at home, and they can look around at how they can increase circularity and support circular economy through the consumption decisions at their home. So the learning journey that we think is important, and we are fighting with it, and we will be able to share a finding after a year. The first step is to know the life cycle assessment. And I think you're able to see my screen, Gosia?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so yeah. not the problem like last.
No, it works.
Good. So the life cycle assessment, and this is what Harrison was also talking about, is that you look at the complete cycle, not in pieces and not the reductionist model, but the whole system approach. So the life cycle assessment is one key learning that we need to have and as part of the journey when we are advancing circular economy, so that we understand that where we can make the changes and increase the circularity in the system. Second skill and the knowledge and understanding is about identifying the principles of circular economy and understanding those three principles. And we have produced case studies to understand, and I will share some of the case studies in the later. And then the third is basically also looking at nature and getting inspired from nature and design naturally. so that we understand that there is no concept of waste in nature, but very important, why there is no concept. And the concept of nutrient is there, that all the waste that is generated at one level of food chain is a nutrient for the next level. Then we look at the impacts of product on environment. So this prepares the child with the information and the skills that are required to take action. And after that, the students, the committee does with the environmental review to look at that, what is the state of circularity in their school, and develop an action plan. And then there is a tool we have created to do that. Then they develop an action plan, and implement those action plan. And there is a rubric to help them understand and prioritize as part of the project that has been developed. And then last challenge is that then they present that the design for circular economy. This is a design challenge, which is more like a competition, and done as part of Inform and Involve, is that they look at one product or one thing, and they present that how it can be redesigned to be more circular. And then eco code, and then events and competition. So this is the complete learning journey that we are proposing as part of the project. So simply, if we take the example of paper, you can extend products. Instead of buying books, there can be a library and there can be sharing. Books can be passed on from one class to the next class, and there won't be a new need for new books, and this will support the circularity or reuse of material, and it is also a way of designing out waste. Second is designing use basically alternative material. For example, for the paper, we can use bagasse material or other kind of pulp or other material from nature instead of using virgin tree or virgin forest for producing waste. And this also ties up very strongly with the principle of regenerative economy, which supports development of and regenerates the environment. And the third is recycling of the material and using material which has been produced through recycling, and look at produces hygiene products using that. And so they basically use Tetra Pak, separate the aluminum from it and the paper from it, and then paper goes for manufacturing, and aluminum also goes to a different industry. But plastic and the aluminum is used to make the dispenser, and the paper is produced using the recycling of the paper, the material. So sharing, looking at products which uses alternative material and products which uses recycled material is a way of advancing circular economy with an example of paper. So simple questions that can be used when you look at around your home or school, is that and this can be done for anything that is being used. Are paper products made of recycled papers? Or so instead of paper, you can add like, are tins made products made of recycled metal? Where can paper use be reduced or eliminated? Do the products have sustainability labels? So that is also an important element to consider. And this is also one important education, that it should be able to modify eco labels and support products that use those eco labels as part of supporting and advancing circular economy. What is done with used books passed on the next one? Same with this can be done for any kind of product or material that is used, and how where get paper be reused or safely disposed of. So this is the third one, is basically if we can't reuse it, we can't share it, then where we dispose it of, that's so it can be again put into the systems of productions productively. And then we have produced a rubric to assess a circular economy compliant school. So it has two sections, that what kind of education a school is giving, and then part B is about what kind of environmental impact on resources school is making. So we have used the theme of food, we have given examples of food, we have given water, example of greening, waste management, paper, transport, computer fairness, and it can be that extended, but we have used these and these are the things that we use on daily life, within whether we are in school or whether we are in an office or we are at home. So we can look at this as an environmental as a way of advancing circular economy, both at school and at home. So you can contact us. If you need a publication, please feel free to write and we will be able to share the draft publication that we are testing. It is available in English, Latvian, and Slovene language. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Pramod. I think many people find it very useful and interesting. And now I would like to open floor for questions. And I will try to find all the questions that were on chat, but if you have more, please also wave your hand and you can ask them directly to our presenters. And I will start from the last question. Is there a practice group to share knowledge and experience? Also, if you have a curriculum on system thinking and curriculum economy for K-12, how can we partner with your organization and schools? I think it's more to Pramod, yes.
On Facebook, you can follow us on EcoSchools, and also as a practice group, I know there is a group on Facebook which is called Circular Economy Club, which shares practices and ideas of how we can support circular economy. And then you can always work as part of EcoSchool to share your work and practices, and then we can always learn together as such. Yes, Harrison, do you have any other comment from your side?
Yes, only to say that we have on our website, on the schools and colleges section of the site, we have a curriculum on complexity, systems thinking and complexity, and so there's some great tips and lesson plans and structures that you can use there for anybody interested in incorporating systems thinking. And maybe there's a way to share that. I can share that link with you, and that can get sent to all the participants.
Yes,
or you can share that link in the chat itself now.
Yes, you
yeah,
can.
I'll do that now.
Right, thank you so much. And there is another question. In simple terms, everyone has to start thinking of going back to basics, e.g. pick an orange from the tree, peel will turn to fertilizer, and the pips would regenerate to new orange trees. What about artificially generated products? Which of you would be able to take this question?
Yeah, I can take this one. So yeah, I mean, it is in essence, the concept is very simple. There are levels of nuance and complexity as it builds up, but the core idea is very simple, and it really is. You have captured it perfectly, really. This idea that, you know, an orange grows in nature, we can harvest it, we can peel it and eat it, and then that can be, the nutrients in that peel can be returned as fertilizer to regenerate farmland and grow more oranges. And I'm actually working on an animation at the moment which tells that exact same story, which I hope to release quite soon. But yeah, it's a great way of explaining something like the circular economy to really young students. You know, a 7 or 8-year-old and, you know, really young kids could understand that concept. And so it's a nice way of saying, well, imagine if our man-made world, you know, all the man-made things that we have, operated in a similar way, and they were able to be broken down and rebuilt and reused at end of life, and those materials don't end up in landfill, but they go back into use. So yeah, I like that. And what about artificially generated products? Well, I mean, artificially generated products could include things like 3D printing, which from a circular economy perspective has many benefits. This idea of distributed manufacturing, local production is great. It can have all kinds of benefits for local communities and for the climate, and doesn't have to be transported great distances. I suppose what's key there with artificially generated products is also thinking about the design and end-of-life use, and also thinking about what kind of materials have actually gone into those artificially generated products. If they are highly toxic materials that have been used in those products, then kind of that's not really very circular at all, even though there might be some other benefits to them. So it's really important to think about the whole life cycle, as Pramod was talking about, and the entire system, and how would this fit in a circular way so that thing can stay in use. Hopefully that's answered your question.
I hope to. If there, I can see that there are more questions coming. So if you also can go into the chat and maybe scroll some of them, I will take the next question to ask you. In a nutshell, is circular economy a collaboration of overlapping concepts as teamwork, analysis, action, understanding of an issue?
That is what I also highlighted when I said, when I wrote the first mail to Harrison, I remember that this is the point I highlighted, that this is an opportunity for all environmental educators to integrate all the work that they are doing, because it brings all the work that we do through those three simple principles into action. And so, ultimately it is about society. And when we look at economy, it is a binding factor that connects everything that we have in our life. So anything that you do, whether you do plantation or you do biodiversity education, you can find linkages to economy. And the moment you find linkages to economy, which is an important concept of sustainable development, you'll find it that you can bring in circularity ideas, and all those three will work everywhere. Those three principles are important behavioral principles, I would say now, if we want to have a sustainable world.
Thank you so much. Yes. Harrison, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, I mean, the circular economy itself is a kind of an amalgamation of lots of different concepts. So there are different schools of thought that have gone into the making of, the kind of baked into the circular economy concept. And some of those I touched on in the talk, but it's quite useful to know. So, for example, biomimicry is a really big element in the circular economy. That's using nature as an inspiration for design. The performance economy is definitely a big part of it, and that's a concept really developed by Walter Starhill, and that is around this idea of shifting from selling products to selling services. So it's really saying people don't need to own washing machines. What people really need is clean clothes. So it's all about access rather than having to own these things. And that shifts the whole model is shifted then, because companies retain ownership of these things. They're incentivized to design them to last, and because they don't want them to break. So it gets rid of this whole planned obsolescence idea, and it allows you to have access to just actually those things that you really need. You can apply that to lighting, like as Philips Lighting as a Service, and there's also companies like Bundles that are offering washing as a service, washing machines as a service. And then there's also there's other things. There's industrial ecology makes up the concept, which kind of is this idea that one industry's waste can become food or an input for another industry. As an example, there's a place in the US where the spent grains from a brewery are then fed into another local business. They all operate under one roof. That other local business can grow mushrooms out of the spent grains from the brewery. So one waste becomes feedstock. And there are others. There are quite a few others, but essentially it's to say that circular economy is kind of bringing all of these different concepts and ideas together into one one cohesive concept.
Thank you so much. We have also the question, there was one of the questions, can we consider ocean as an example of circular economy?
Well, I would like to respond to that. I was not aware about ocean, then I Googled it, and it's a coastal or a marine cleanup project or program. And for ocean, I think there are two principles here. When we do a cleanup and reduce and remove the foreign material which should not be there, we are helping in regeneration of an ecosystem. Ocean is an ecosystem, so there is a regenerative aspect. But then we have to look at the complete recycle. Is that not that we take the material out, but then we have to look at that we don't get into getting the waste again into the oceans. So how do we work backward on stopping the pollution that happens and the plastic and other material get into the ocean? Second is what we do with the material that we take out. I know of many big brands which is using this material to produce shoes, sneakers, or clothing material. And I would like to highlight that. So how do we? So we need to look at both the aspects, just not cleaning up the ocean, but also seeing that we stop the problem by changing our consumption patterns. And the second is that what we do with the rescued material. I will say not rescue polluted material. The material that we rescue, what we do that with that productively with that material.
Thank you. I can see there is another question on chat, but I would like to ask if anyone would like to ask the question now when there is an opportunity to have discussion with our presenters instead of writing. Okay, it's quiet. I will read the last question. How does eSpace circular economy project is useful to students and schools in India through this concept is not much familiar in India? How many students will get benefit?
So the simple thing is that we are doing this concept because people are not familiar with it. And the entire idea of eSpace project is to make children familiar with it. So if you need the material, just write an email to us and we will share the material with you. Use those lesson plans, try them out with your kids, and then get us a feedback. And then let's continuously develop and improve the material that we have.
Yeah, I can see another question coming. We still have maybe 2 minutes yet for some questions before we finish this webinar. But we can go with this one yet. Our elders grew up in the era where circular economy was unwittingly practiced. We need to review what they did and use their system, or perhaps use modern technology to build, on the process and make it more efficient. How do you see elderly being involved?
I learn from them, and one of the activities I would suggest is asking our students to go and interview them, that how and what were the practices. For example, a simple practice, to our office we pick up a lunchbox from a store which is packaged in plastic, and then we heat it up and then throw that plastic. So the question is that, okay, what our elders used to do, so because they never had that plastic packaging. And we can go back to those ideas that, okay, and think critically that what kind of practices can be brought back. Remember, everything we cannot romanticize everything. We need to be very critical of thinking that what can be done and what cannot be done. But start looking at it, and that's the first step, that design out waste. So in any habit or any decision that we take, look at that, okay, what waste is produced and how can I reduce it? That's the question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Pramod. And I can see that Harrison posted few links to website on Ellen MacArthur Foundation.
Yes, that's a link to the module on complexity and systems thinking.
Okay, thank you so much. Before we finish, I'd like to share with you just some few questions that we have on our Mentimeter. If you would like to go to those questions, please go with your phone to www.menti.com. and you can use code 900525.
I think there is a typo there. What do you take away? Take word is missing there.
Yeah, what do you think to take out of this presentation? Yes. What do you take away? Are you going to share with us some information? What did you take away? Oh, yes. Thank you so much. Pramod, would you like to say something?
Yeah. The relation to nature. I think this complete idea has come from nature. If you observe very carefully, I think this is one important question that whenever you take your children out, whenever you out and ask this question and reflect, what is waste in nature? And then you will understand this concept far better.
Yes, going back to basics, nature-based concept.
Production is important.
Yes. And you can still answer on this. We have also another. What principles of circular economy are you more likely to adopt?
Yes, that's one easy thing that we can do instead of throwing out waste. Anything that doesn't work, try to repair it or take the parts out. And so one of the case studies that we have put is a fair phone in our educational material lesson plan. And fair phone is a concept where the phone is modular. Anything that doesn't work, that part can be replaced.
I think it's worth mentioning as well that there are quite a few products that are not designed to be easily repaired, and that there's certainly an onus on businesses to enable repair. You know, it's very difficult for lots of people to repair an Apple iPhone, for example.
Yes, thank you so much. And just one last question. Did you find the webinar useful? And in the meantime, I would like to thank everyone for participating in this webinar, and thank you, Harrison, for your presentation and explaining to us all the background information on circular economy. Thank you so much. And Pramod, thank you for sharing the ideas about the project and the lesson plans that can be used by everyone participating in this webinar and all your colleagues and friends from schools. And once again, I would like to invite you for the webinar next week about photography. It will be run in a practical way, how to use photography in education, but also please invite your students to participate in that webinar. It's mostly for them, how to use the time also when we are locked down at homes, and how we can share the stories about living in sustainable lifestyle during the time when we have to stay at home, and this time when it's very difficult to everyone. And in 2 weeks, there will be also another webinar, and we will share information also about it later today. So thank you so much for today, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Stay safe. Bye.
Bye.